develop and use for my psychology actually is the ability to understand where people are at. So sometimes I don't even initially pitch to a product when I speak to a client. The first conversation I have with a client is, okay, so tell me about you. I want to know about you. I want to know about your goals. I want to know what you want to do with the business and how I can make sure that I'm advocating for you. And I feel like by letting your client be able to speak about themselves, you can then meet them on their journey and tailor solutions to help them succeed.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Daniel Coker, your regular host, and our guest today is the amazing Nadine Rochelle Haughton.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
You did.
And Nadine, and we'll find out a bit more what she does. Nadine is a sales manager.
Yeah.
Sales manager at Google Systems or
Google Advertising.
Google Advertising. Okay, we'll find out a bit more about that later. And she's got a very interesting story, and somebody that I got to know actually through a mutual friend, Alicia. Shout out to Alicia Richardson. And today we're going to be having a conversation about Nadine's journey from a psychology degree at Brunel and to a career in sales. And for those of you who are watching who might be wondering about pursuing a career in sales, I'm sure there's a lot that we will learn from our conversation today.
I hope so.
Nadine, you're welcome to Against All Odds.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Tell us a bit about your journey, because in doing the research for this sit down, I found out that you had quite a bit of a varied background. You were into music and you did a whole bunch of things. Did you grow up in Surrey?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Purley, which is on the cusp of Surrey, but I like to claim Surrey versus Croydon. So yeah, why not? Surrey.
Why not? So tell us a bit about your journey. Yeah, just tell us a bit about your background, because we tend to find that people's background sort of forms a context from which they evolve into the people that we are much later on in life. Before this episode starts, I'd like to ask a big favor. 2 weeks ago, we did some analysis on our back end, and we found out that 59% of people who are watching this channel on a regular basis are currently not subscribed. Your subscription means a lot to us, because the bigger this platform gets, the bigger the guests get. So do me a favor, please click on the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Now let's get back to this episode.
Yeah, I completely agree actually. So in terms of my background, very much a South London girl, so shout out to anyone from Croydon. But I do claim Purley, and I definitely did live in Purley. And you know, I started off with very humble beginnings. My parents came to London from Wolverhampton.
Okay.
So yeah, so my grandparents are part of the Windrush era. They met in church and then decided to move to London for more job opportunities, and I think that was the best decision because I don't know how I would have survived in Wolverhampton. But yeah, I am the eldest of 3 girls, and it was just a really nice household to be in. Purley at the time wasn't that diverse, so I have to say that. So I very much was surrounded by people that didn't look like me growing up until secondary school, when I actually demanded to my parents that I wanted to go to a school in Croydon so I could be with people that looked like me. But yeah, prior to that, very much had a great upbringing in terms of the different schools that I went to. I was very much encouraged to pursue a lot of hobbies, which is probably why you saw music. I was always into drama as well as sports. So any sort of extracurricular activity you could have seen me at. I tried to do everything. Even learn the piano, but that didn't last that long. Okay. But yeah, as I progressed and as I went to secondary school and college and then uni, I very much had an eye for embracing diversity and just being around people that not just look like me, but across like multiple different cultures. And I was always interested in understanding people's backgrounds, why they acted the way that they did, and so forth. So that's kind of probably why I pursued psychology, actually, initially. It wasn't just because I was obsessed with CSI and Criminal Minds shows. I mean, that was definitely one factor. But I very much had an interest in trying to understand why people behave the way they do. And also just a willingness to want to help the community as well. So decided to go on and actually do drama on the side, but pursue a career in psychology initially. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I went to Brunel University, as you mentioned, and it was a great experience for me. I was able to learn everything I needed to know. But I don't know, when I then graduated and started working for the NHS for a few years, it was an interesting experience, because as much as I loved doing what I could when it comes to practically applying everything I learnt in a work environment, I did see that there were a lot of patients that were black and a lot of medical practitioners who were white. And I understand that potentially it could have just been down to like access, or maybe people not wanting to pursue that route. But it was quite upsetting to see that there were people that were diagnosing a community that they didn't understand. And there was a lack of education around why people behave the way they do based on their heritage, to be honest. So I did initially want to continue exploring that route. But the NHS, as I'm sure we all know, isn't the most lucrative industry to be in. And I did feel like I was investing a lot of time and energy and not actually getting any financial reward out of it. And going back to my childhood, financial stability was very important to me, because my parents, as much as I did have a loving environment, they divorced. My dad actually moved back to Jamaica for a few years, and my mum struggled for the initial few years that he was away. And I could just see, as a single mother raising 3 girls, how challenging it was. And it definitely installed in me the need to always want to be able to survive and have a comfortable life at all costs, and also just not rely on anyone. As beautiful as it is to be in a relationship with someone, ultimately you've come on this earth by yourself, so you need to do all you can to make sure that you're protected. I feel like because of that, from the age of 16, I had loads of jobs. I worked at McDonald's. I worked everywhere. I worked literally everywhere. And it came to a point where I had to make a compromise. Like, do I go down this route where I continue exploring my passions, but potentially struggle to a certain extent? Or do I look for ways where I can balance and have hobbies where I can still have that need, and also just, I guess, like the platform to help others, but also from a career perspective, go down routes where I can potentially be a bit more financially successful. So I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I very much went from like A to Z to B to Y. But in a nutshell, I had a very positive upbringing, but I could see the impacts of a broken family. And I very much learned that as an individual, I need to make sure that I'm doing all I can to make sure that I'm financially good.
Would you say that the experience of your parents separating when you were 11 has kind of left a certain, did you have to go to therapy maybe later on in life, or how have you dealt with that reality?
That's a good question. I think I should have went to therapy earlier on. I actually have a psychologist now, and I strongly recommend anyone to just go to see one anyway, because you don't really realize some of the childhood things that you go through that later impacts your personality and how you view the world as an adult. But as the relationship with my dad, for instance, I definitely felt a sense of feeling unwanted, unloved, and it impacted the way that I viewed men, to be honest. I'm in a very loving relationship with an amazing boyfriend now, but it definitely impacted my confidence and feeling less than. So there was a lot of things that I needed to basically work on to help with my confidence. And it's funny that you say, as a salesperson, you need to be confident, you need to have this resilience, because that wasn't me 5 years ago, and I was definitely in sales. I was very much using my drama skills to fake it till I make it. but yeah, I think I I really did feel lost for quite some time, and I've only recently got to a place where I feel quite content with myself. If that makes sense.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, so let's just go back a step. Um, the venturing into sales, because you started with the NHS and then you kind of figured out that it probably wasn't the most financially rewarding career to pursue, and you've basically highlighted how financial security and all that was important to you. Why sales? I mean, how did you end up in sales? Because it's a completely, and not just sales, but tech sales. And because you've been at I think Adobe, and then you
Mm.
were at Oracle.
Mm.
Your career path has been in the tech space, and I'm quite curious to understand how that happened. I mean, how did you make a transition from psychology in the NHS to getting your first job in sales? I mean, somebody must have opened the door.
Oh yeah.
Something. I'm just quite curious to hear that story.
Yeah, 100%. So to be honest, my first sales job was in real estate before tech. I
Oh,
worked
okay.
in Foxtons. So shout out anyone that's a real estate agent. But yeah, I worked in Foxtons for, I lasted 10 months. So it
Okay.
wasn't a successful experience. But I was actually really good and hit my target. So I was definitely a top salesperson when I left. But the reason why I decided to pursue sales and initially Foxtons is because at the time, after realizing that maybe the NHS wasn't for me, I was just trying to figure out, okay, so what makes sense? And as a graduate, you don't really know what career to pursue. But I saw people with their flashy cars and
Yeah, the little
their
Foxes
their
minis.
suits. Yeah, they sold the lifestyle to me. I'm not gonna lie. So I applied, went to the academy, and then one of the things that I have to obviously attribute Foxtons for giving me is that dedication and resilience, because they train you to be a hunter. Like it's actually bad. Like it's mad, the training. Like they make you call 50 people minimum a day. They make you go on X amount of viewings. Like you're working from 8 a.m. to sometimes 10 p.m. trying to get those sales closed. And though I actually quite liked the thrill of the chase, I did think it was very intense, and I didn't really feel like I was learning anything. It's quite a transactional sales cycle. As much as I love going around showing people beautiful houses. So after I decided that potentially Foxtons wasn't for me, and I did do well, but it just wasn't for me. I actually just looked at graduate programs, and at that time, tech, it was interesting, but no one really knew where tech was going to scale, if that makes sense. So I actually think I went in at the right time. And there were all these different graduate program opportunities. And to be honest, the tech companies were paying the most out of the graduate programs that I was seeing. I know that sounds hard, but I have to just go back to where the money resides. That's a common theme that you're going to hear from me today. And I actually then applied to be part of like a graduate scheme at Axiom. And I was specifically tasked with being like a data consultant and selling data. And that was like pre-GDPR. If anyone doesn't know what GDPR is, I'll keep it very simple. But it's just like a regulation where now we have to be quite restricted with the data that we have on people. But back then, we could sell anything. And it was just such easy money, but also just an opportunity to be a part of like the crazy world of agencies. And back then it was mad, like parties galore, going out till 4 a.m. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the life as a 19-year-old. So I actually quite loved it. And but the additional thing is how technical it was, because I felt like I was able to learn things as well. I was moving away from that transactional sales cycle to something more strategic, where I fully had to understand a client's business. I really needed them to see me as that trusted advisor. And to your point, there was a lot of pushback, and I had to remain determined to basically build that connection. But I must say, tech now versus tech back in the day was completely different when it comes to diversity. I was the only black person in that office.
Wow.
And I felt it. I felt it. I think they saw me as an experiment. um, and don't get me wrong, like obviously I was treated well, but yeah, like I really struggled initially in the tech industry due to like imposter syndrome, feeling very different, but also I was somewhat kind of like put into a category because of what I looked like as well. I found it harder to build rapport with clients in comparison to my white male peers, for instance, where it was just quite easy. They could go to the pub and then the deal would be signed. It's not that easy, just in case people think, oh yeah, go to the pub. No, maybe back then it could have been, but not now. But yeah, initially I did struggle with that too. And I think I had this need to want to be accepted. So I also saw that as an additional challenge. Like, how can I make sure that I build my brand within this industry where people like me aren't embraced, and actually then do well from it? So there was loads of different factors that kept me in tech. And it just made me feel, okay, yeah, this is where I can start using all these different skills and trying to make like a name for myself.
It's quite interesting that you say that, because when I first started my career in finance, I think I was working with one of these banks, and I saw this advert in the paper for people who wanted to earn like six-figure incomes, and it wasn't quite clear what it was all about. Anyway, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Anyway, so I turned up at this interview, and it was a life insurance business who were looking for salespeople.
Yeah.
And they promise you all the glitzy things, the trips to the Caribbean, and the flashy cars, the nice watches, and then they give you these. First of all, you've got to come up with a list of prospects, your own prospects, and start calling them and trying to, sell them life insurance. And it got to a stage that, anytime I called people, they wouldn't take my call because then I was trying to sell them something. But bottom line is, it makes you tough.
Yeah,
it makes you resilient.
it does.
And it gets to a stage where you don't really care what people think. And I find that, especially starting this podcast, because it wasn't something that I ever envisioned. It wasn't something that I planned. I completely fell into it. I was in Portugal playing golf with some friends, and at my sister's 60th birthday party, and the idea just dropped that nobody's really capturing our stories.
Yeah.
And I said, fine, I'm going to do this. But I didn't really care what anybody thought, or I didn't really care that, it just doesn't make any difference. And I find that having that mindset makes it a bit easier to deal with the knocks, which inevitably come with anything that is public facing or sales oriented.
Yeah.
So maybe just tell us a bit about resilience, because we've only recently connected, but I sense a certain sense of resilience, like a thick skin, and I mean, before we came on air, I was kind of asking you, where did this come from? Because a lot of people are very sensitive to, what people think and the emotions, and what will they say if they see me trying to sell something, and you know what I mean. Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I may come across like a brick, but I'm not. Honestly, I'll be crying behind closed doors, even today. But I feel like it comes with experience, I don't think... I mean, some people are just blessed to be born with resilience. That was not me. I remember I used to cry when I was at Axiom, and sometimes people go for lunch and not invite me. Like things like that. Like I really put importance on the social element of work. And even like from a cold calling perspective, when you're calling people up, I used to just assume that people didn't want to buy from me because from my email, they would have assumed that maybe I might have been a different type of race. But then when I jump on a video call, they're like, oh. And everyone always seems surprised initially by my age, but also my colour.
Okay.
I could sense it. But I feel like I've now come to a place where I turn down lunches with my colleagues. I'm all right. I'm by my desk. And it's not even personal to them. Like, I will happily go for a lunch, but it's just not... I don't care anymore because I feel like I've already made a name for myself. I think it comes with you understanding your capabilities. I think back then, because I was new to the industry, I didn't know if I was good, if that makes sense. I didn't have any sort of like benchmark to compare myself to. And I feel like to be honest, I don't know, I just had a feeling of being less than as well, if that makes sense, in terms of the positions that I had as well. But I think as I decided to pursue different ways to progress in companies and get the relevant promotions and advocate for myself, that then helped in terms of my confidence within the workforce, if that makes sense. So I very much have this sentiment that you should only judge me based on my work. Don't judge me whether I go to the pub with you or whether we go for lunch or what we do on the weekends. Judge me based on the money that I'm bringing to the business. And because that's been something that I primarily focus on, and I've been quite resilient in making sure that happens, that's helped me become this confident person where I know if I get pushback, eventually they're going to buy into me and they're going to invest. It's all about remaining determined and just making sure that you're hearing them. Because I do actually find that a lot of salespeople, they push the narrative or they pitch the product, but they don't invest the time to actually listen to the clients and actually understand why they may not be interested in pursuing whichever proposition you're trying to present to them. And one thing that I've definitely been able to develop and use for my psychology actually is the ability to understand where people are at. So sometimes I don't even initially pitch to a product when I speak to a client. The first conversation I have with a client is, okay, so tell me about you. I want to know about you. I want to know about your goals. I want to know what you want to do with the business and how I can make sure that I'm advocating for you. And I feel like by letting your client be able to speak about themselves, you can then meet them on their journey and tailor solutions to help them succeed. It's all about helping your client, not helping yourself. So I think switching it up and prioritizing others versus yourself will get you further.
You made a very important point there about understanding people.
Yeah.
And I'm also very passionate. I mean, I didn't have a psychology degree, but I've spent many years, I've read many books, and I'd say that it has been an extremely helpful attribute being able to just get people and to get along with people. Because I did, I'm a chartered management accountant by training, but I discovered quite early on that I wasn't just a numbers person. It just didn't interest me. And initially I was a bit worried because I was like, what's going on here? But then I came across a guy called Roger Hamilton who teaches something called wealth dynamics and the fact that different people have different personality traits. And then I just began to understand who I was. And my personality trait is what you call the deal maker profile, which is somebody who connects people. And I'm very much in my element, like doing this podcast. I just love it because I get to meet. For me, I think I should be paid to do this, and I should be paying for this. But I just love meeting different people. I just love hearing different stories.
Yeah.
I just love getting into the mindset of people who are doing just different things because it just deepens my understanding of people, and it helps me to relate better.
100%.
And for someone who's watching this, who's probably an introvert and probably just stays in their little space, what advice do you think you can give to somebody like that about maybe daring to step out of their comfort zone and trying to understand people a bit better? Because as you've said, that in itself helps you to build rapport. People trust you better. You're more reactive to their needs. I mean, even in the workplace, even if you just take somebody working for someone, if you're working for someone, you understand your boss, right? You understand their little nuances and whatever it is. You're able to relate better, because you kind of know how it lies with this person.
Yeah.
So I think that people being intentional about understanding other people would help them. And what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is don't assume that you don't have anything that you can connect with someone based on like your different upbringings or different types of cultures, for instance. There's always something that you can connect with on. And I do believe that it helps when it's in a smaller group environment. So one thing that I would suggest is book a coffee chat. If you want to connect with someone, even if it's someone you don't know, like just message someone on LinkedIn. There's no harm. They'll either say yes or no. You can either have an initial Zoom call or whatever video conference call they would prefer, or ultimately just say, hey, I really want to understand how you've been able to be successful in this company, or your role in more detail, and just your background and why you've pursued this journey. It'd be great if we could have a coffee. I really want to understand you. People love to talk about themselves. Let's be real. Like we all have borderline narcissism. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like anyone that messages me on LinkedIn say, hey, can I have a coffee? I just love what you're doing at Google. I'd be like, yeah, why not? Like I do feel like introverts also have the power to do that. Now, I understand that there may be like confidence issues in terms of being in a room where loads of people are looking at you, or being in an environment like this where you've got a camera in your face. But there's other ways that you can connect with people at a smaller scale and still have that same impact. So I just think just a casual hi, can we have a one-to-one chat, will go a long way. I think other things that potentially they could do as well, research is key. Like I think it's, for instance, it's good that you even looked at my LinkedIn profiles, for instance. There's been other podcasts that I've been on where they're like, okay, so tell me about you. Where do you work? Like, honestly, if you're able to use social media because it's there, you have access to so much information about someone. All you could do is literally like a post or see something in terms of their background and just say, hey, like, I really like what you did back in 2017. It'd be great to have a conversation about it. Like, people like when you kind of understand them prior to even connecting with them too. And that's something that anyone can do. I do feel like introverts, it's time for you to shine. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. It's all about how you connect with someone on a one-to-one basis and the research that you can do as well to fully understand where that person's coming from.
Okay, fantastic. Let's talk about personal branding.
Yeah.
Because I've come to realize that personal branding is quite key to how people perceive you, and people will relate with you on the level that they perceive you to be. You know, and I don't know what your brand is, you know, but what have you done to curate that brand, and how has that helped you in this journey? Because obviously you're client facing, and all that. You know, you might have initial conversations, as you said. You might start a conversation by asking a client about themselves and all that. But if I was to ask you, you know, Nadine, you know, what's your brand? You know, what would that be?
That's a good question. And that's actually something I'm working on, because I don't think like I've done a good job in terms of establishing my brand in the industry. I very much just focus on creating a brand within the work environment that I'm in. So the advice that I would give in terms of in your actual workplace, there's no harm sending an email to your team about an amazing sell that you've done with your clients, for instance, because no one else is going to hear about it unless you shout about it. So I've actually now started doing things like this. Before I thought it was very cringe, but I don't think there's any harm saying, oh, this is a challenge that I worked on and this is what I was able to resolve, and either doing it in a presentation or email format. I also think in terms of establishing your brand, LinkedIn's key too. It's not something that I've 100% gone in, like my best friend Alicia, for instance. Like, that's an example of someone that's amazing at being able to establish her brand on LinkedIn. I wish I had the time to do it, but you know what? I'm going to carve out the time. Because I feel like there's a need. But yeah, the beauty of social media is the scalability of your audience, if that makes sense. So I do feel like having an up-to-date LinkedIn, posting maybe even like once a month, for instance, just making sure that people know who you are and engaging with your content. Keep visible, yeah, but keep it consistent as well. But I also think networking. So one thing I do quite well is just going to networking events and just being able to connect with your community and being able to see people and introduce yourself to people that don't actually work at your company, for instance. That helps in terms of establishing your brand, like word of mouth, and just being able to be around more people that are like you and are pursuing the same type of like fields as you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you've recently come back from this networking event. I can't remember the name. Cephas. I can't remember his name.
Cephas Williams.
Cephas Williams, yeah. Cephas Williams. Yeah. I messaged him. I didn't get a reply. I'm still trying to get through to him. But maybe one day.
Busy man.
Yeah, but he put together this Cannes festival thing. I'm not too, I'm not too knowledgeable of exactly what it is, but I think it's like a creative, like an away week for creative people or something like that. I mean, how did you find that beneficial? Because I think you went for that. Was that on your own back, or was it through sponsorship, or was that through?
So I actually didn't go via Cephas. To be fair, I was meant to potentially be going with Cephas, but I actually didn't go via Cephas. Google actually do their own sponsorship for Cannes Festival and have their own clients. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, from my understanding, what he does, it's just a community of Black professionals within the creative industry, and you get sponsorships from multiple different brands, maybe like a Spotify or a Google, to basically help with accommodation and giving them the platform. That's mainly what I know. I don't really know anything else.
Okay. But what happens at Cannes? I mean, what is so special about Cannes? It's because it seems to be some place to be seen or some place to be. I don't know.
To be honest, it's a it's a place where you could literally walk on the beach and bump into the CEO of Meta and have a conversation with him. Okay. So Cannes is a place where you'll have leadership across multiple different tech and creative industries, going there for networking purposes, but also hosting events where they can just share, I guess, an update in terms of what the vision is for the business. So at the moment, AI seems to be a big focus across a lot of these tech companies. So I know like Google had the stand, obviously Meta, Amazon, and they were just talking about what AI means for their respective businesses. Mm-hmm. But it's just a good way for you to be able to meet other people within the industry, but also gain access to that senior leadership too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nadine, what inspires you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
It's a good question. Well, other than money. Other than that.
I like your honesty.
Other than that, you know what? I've been very blessed to have a strong community of friends and family. So what also inspires me is my need to make sure that I'm there for them, if that makes sense. So being able to give back to my community that have always been supportive of me, that inspires me. I'm also inspired by change. Like, I'm very much an advocate for diversity. I mentor quite a lot of students actually, and professionals, young professionals who want to get into tech. So I'm an advocate of trying to make sure that we have a seat at the table. So I'm even part of the Black Google Network Steering Committee, for instance, where we host loads of events to try and get more people into Google. So that's a passion of mine as well. But yeah, ultimately right now, I did kind of allude to it, but I've got to a place where I feel a lot more confident and content with where I am. So I want to get out of bed so I can figure out now, this new Nadine with all this confidence, what can I do to make sure that I'm continuing to elevate myself, if that makes sense, beyond just what I'm currently doing. I don't have any entrepreneurial ideas right now, but I'm working on it and I'm thinking about different ideas, and I want to be able to try and pursue things outside of Google as well, because I don't think that your workplace should be the only thing that defines you. There should be other things that you should be interested in, that you should definitely try and pursue, like even you with this podcasting, for instance. So at the moment, I'm trying to figure out what that looks like, if that makes sense. And it's definitely getting me out of bed.
Yeah. What would you say might be a challenge that you've personally had to overcome in your career progression, and how did you sort of go about that? You know, any personal or professional challenge that you've had to overcome?
I think one of the challenges, and I think anyone that is part of a big tech organization can relate, is standing out when there's so many people. And I feel like upon reflection, I might have wanted to pursue more startup companies before. So anyone that comes to me saying how to get into tech, I say go to a small startup company, because that's where you'll learn so much more. You get thrown into the deep end and it's easier to progress. So one of my challenges is being able to progress quite quickly in a large organization where there's so many skilled and amazing people. I actually have been okay to date, but yeah, there's been various different knockbacks. There's obviously been challenges with pay disparity in different organizations, not Google, that I've had to deal with as well. And it definitely does impact your confidence, especially when you feel like you're working hard, you're hitting your targets, but why am I not being seen? So So I'm trying to understand the environment that I'm in, but also control that too. So if there's an organization, and this is why I've gone to different organizations, where I feel like I'm not progressing, I don't think you should stay. I think you should do all you can to go to somewhere where you're embraced.
In terms of the sales cycle, because you did mention earlier on that there's kind of two types of sales cycle. You've got a transactional sales cycle and then more of a relational, bit by bit kind of sales cycle. How does it feel like, you've got a big sale coming up, okay, you've got a prospect, or you've gone past the prospecting stage, all right, you've been invited to, come and submit, to pitch. What does that look like in terms of the preparation, the emotion, getting ready the morning of the pitch, going over your whatever you're going to say, walking up to the door of your client, opening the door, sit in the boardroom, and all these people are there waiting for you to speak. What does that feel like?
It's even now I'm anxious going into a meeting, and I do it on a regular basis for the God knows how many people. We've even got an event where there's 70 people coming to this event next week, and I'm presenting. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I feel like preparation is key, and I think there's two ways that I go about it. First is making sure that you understand who is in the room and what their objectives are, and ultimately you have to do that by booking in time with those clients and asking them the right questions. And then that helps in terms of tailoring your presentation, because I do find that sometimes, even in like these large tech organizations, we fall back on our generic pitches because we feel like, oh, well, they're just going to buy into us because we're Google. Not the case. You need to make sure that you're aligning whatever solution you want to propose to the client to their business needs. So it's a lot of qualifying and asking questions. The second thing that I do is leverage my drama skills and learn a script. Now, I don't obviously stick to the script. And if a client asks me a question, I'm like, nope, I've got this script to follow. But ultimately, it's been very beneficial to me because there's a lot of technical things that I have to learn in this current role. I actually don't even feel like I'm selling anymore. I'm more of a data consultant. And it's just a lot to get your head around. So I do feel like investing that time, fully understanding what you want to present is key too, and just making sure that you have those words on standby to fall back on if you feel like you're losing track and so forth. So that's from a preparation standpoint, but also rely on your peers. You don't have to do everything by yourself. I actually think it's really good to have pitch clinic sessions. And what I mean by that is literally booking in 30 minutes with one of your colleagues that you trust and say, hey, can you review my pitch? This is what I want to present to the client. What do you think? Because I feel like there's things that potentially you may think is great, but actually, upon reflection, with other people listening, could be tailored. So I do feel like rely on your tribe, 100%. And I even think that from an interview perspective as well. Practice your questions and answers with a friend, just so that you know that you're coming across well. And then from an emotional standpoint, I did say obviously anxiety, but again, I still deal with imposter syndrome, even being in this industry for such a long time. So I do think that having these breathing exercises, making sure that you're not late for a meeting so that you're not anxious as well, that definitely helps. I just think try and remain calm at all times, because once you start to panic, you then spit words out that potentially don't make sense, and then you're not delivering the message that you want to. So yeah.
You did mention that your time at Foxtons, or early introduction to sales, you sort of taught how to hunt, so go after something. And personally, my experience in sales sometimes is that sometimes you're better, or you're more likely to make the sale when you don't appear as desperate. Maybe you're desperate deep down, but you come across as whatever. You know what I mean? It's I talk to people, I bring also the people on this podcast, and initially I started with my very close friends. So and very quickly that dried up, and then I realized I had to go beyond. So I've begun to reach out to people like Alicia and shout out Alicia and a whole bunch of other people. And now I'm pretty chilled, because before I used to take it very hard. I'd approach somebody and they'll say, "Oh no, we don't have time for you." Grow to a certain number and maybe come back and we'll have a chat and stuff like that. But now I'm just pretty chilled. I mean, I'm not too stressed. I'm not, if we ask you for an interview and you come on, fine. If you don't, we might get you back a later date. It's fine. It's not a problem. But before, I might have been really stressed and it's like, oh no, I've got to get this person on. Would you say that's being able to project an image of self-confidence, even though maybe deep down you really need that sale, but you're able to sort of keep your emotions in check? Would you say that maybe your play acting skills or whatever when you're much younger played a role in helping you to overcome that sense of appearing too desperate? I don't know if I'm making sense.
You are. Why are you sharing my tactics? Oh my gosh. I think having a poker face, 100%. You need to do. You need to do it. You need to act like they need you more than you need them. Yeah. I do believe that if you come across as that pushy salesperson, it's not attractive. And to be honest, I was that pushy person at Foxtons because we were meant to be that pushy person at Foxtons. But luckily, to be fair, even in an environment where you're doing cold calling at Google, for instance, so like the cloud solutions, I do think it makes sense to be patient. And like I said, hear your clients. Don't just continue to email them on numerous occasions when you know they're not ready yet. Like, make sure that you have that strategy plan in mind, and do your research on their business. But I do understand that there are targets and there's pressures from the business to try and deliver. But I think making sure that you manage those expectations with your manager and with senior leadership is ultimately more important. You don't want to come across as this pushy advertiser or client that literally just wants to sell, because then the client's not going to think that you care about them. Yeah. It's all about making them think that you care about them, which, to be fair, you do. Like, you honestly build really strong, genuine rapport with your clients that you're speaking to on a regular basis. So ultimately, you want to make sure that they are succeeding so they continue investing in you.
Nadine, what do you think about this podcast and what we're trying to do?
I love it. To be honest, I'm seeing a movement of these types of podcasts, and I feel like it's given us a voice, if that makes sense. And I think it's very important, which is why when you reached out to me, I said, yeah, sure. Like, I was very excited to come and be part of this. And I think that it's going to help others to learn as well, especially those who may watch this podcast and may be interested in pursuing tech but don't know where to start and don't know what the experience is like. This gives us an opportunity to share additional insights, especially to potentially those introverts who may not want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So hopefully I've helped you somehow today.
Fantastic. Yeah. We have a tradition on this podcast where we give our guests the opportunity to dedicate their episode to anyone of their choice, or any group of people of their choice. So at this point, I'll be asking, who would you like to dedicate this episode to?
Well, weirdly, seeing as her name's been mentioned a few times, I would like to actually dedicate this podcast to Alicia, because she's definitely someone that I think is a leader in terms of shaping how our community is today and bringing a lot of people with her on that journey. Mm-hmm. I've known her since the age of 11. We've been best friends since then. Okay. So it's been a long time. And I've seen her growth, and I'm very much, we inspire each other in different ways, and I'm very much inspired by what she's been able to build so far. And yeah, I just think it's very important, and ultimately we need to be a tribe in order for us to actually grow and improve diversity and make sure that there's more Black people getting these opportunities. We need to be keeping each other accountable and building on that community. Like, I don't think an individualistic approach works. I think we need to be more collective. So yeah, thanks for shaping that movement.
Yeah, thanks Alicia for bringing us together as well. And yeah, so all too soon we come to the end of our conversation.
Oh, and that was quick and sad.
I know. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm always keen to share or learn from experiences of people who are into sales, because without sales, nothing happens.
Exactly.
Nothing happens without sales.
Mm.
And you'd be amazed at how much more confident you can be in life, how much more positive, how your outlook on life can be totally changed if you overcome that fear of rejection. And that's probably another thing that I was going to ask you about. How you've dealt with the fear of rejection. Maybe I'll ask that now. How have you dealt with the fear of rejection?
It's been hard. It's I don't even know if I can share any best practices in terms of dealing with it. I just feel like it's never you. I think initially I would always think, oh, what is wrong with me? And always look for ways to try and improve myself. And don't get me wrong, there's obviously experience, there's different skills that you can pick up. But ultimately, if someone says no, it's very much because of their situation. And it's then up to you to figure out why they're saying no. Don't just assume that it's no because you're not good at your job or you're doing something wrong. Ask the right questions.
Yeah, I interviewed somebody last week, and he was just basically saying that when you experience rejection, it's just feedback.
Yeah.
See it as feedback.
Yeah, literally.
And learn from it, and then come back again. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nadine, thank you once again for your time and for coming on our podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd like you to subscribe, comment, and share this episode to as many people as possible, so that we can build a big platform, a voice for our community, and shape the narrative. Because there's a lot of people out there whose lives will be far better off when they see others like themselves having succeeded against all odds. This could be you. So let's build this together. Thank you very much, Nadine.
Thank you.
We did this.